Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here this afternoon. We are very excited that we have Lisa Cole from Acorn Internet Services with us here this afternoon, as well as Annie is with us on the webinar today, and she's going to be fielding questions as we go through today's topic. And a couple of things before we get started, I just wanted to let everyone know, because we have so many properties who are joining us today, we do have everyone on mute, and we would love to have your questions shared. Annie's going to be fielding them, as I mentioned, as we go through. So if you just use the questions box there on your screen to submit questions, we'll be handling those as Lisa goes through the presentation today. We also are recording today's session, and we will be sending out a recording to everyone and an email that will come up to you tomorrow. So you'll receive that. So I know there's going to be a lot of information being shared, so you'll be able to access that recording at any time. I would like to introduce Lisa. I'm sure many of you who are on the call today have met Lisa. She has been in the industry for several years, and she came originally from the banking software world to the innkeeping world. And the way many corporate leaders do, by deciding to open a B&B as well. And as the years passed, she realized how much there was a need for internet marketing solutions in the industry. And as a result, Acorn Internet Services was born back in 2002. And Lisa has been an incredible advocate and educator in the industry, and we always look to her for knowledge in all times, and especially now with so many questions about what we can do to reopen the properties and what steps we should be taking. So it's my pleasure to introduce Lisa, and I'm going to pass it over to her and Annie.
Thanks, Janice. And Annie Buck, our educational manager, is on with us, and she's going to help us handle the questions. So please do ask questions. It always makes for a more fun and exciting webinar. But let's go ahead and get started.
Oh, okay. It looks like we may have lost Lisa there.
We can still see her screen, but we can't hear her.
I wonder if she has gone offline.
The audio. Can you guys hear me now?
There you are.
There you are. Okay, great.
Perfect. All right, so let's try this again and see if the phone will hold. All right, so let's get started with the Stay Safe, Stay Small, Stay In program. And how are you planning to reopen? I imagine most of you folks have already reopened your doors, at least at some percentage of availability, and some may have not quite opened yet. I know California opened up yesterday, and well, I think it was the 12th. And there's different parts of the country that have been open for a while and some that haven't. So let's go ahead and jump into this, and hopefully you will be able to, if you can't use this information right this moment, you will be able to use it very soon. So as just a quick disclaimer, Acorn Internet Services is an internet marketing company. We are not attorneys. I cannot provide you legal counsel, and some of this may get into the question of what can you ask and what can you not ask of your guests. So if you're unsure of how you should approach any of the topics discussed today, or the language you should be using in your written communications with your guests, you should be contacting your own attorney for legal assistance. All right, so how did we start with the Stay Safe, Stay Small, Stay In program? Well, we started back in, it was March, when everything started to get closed down. Acorn stepped in and started doing some training for our Advantage Plan clients. And we started on March 24th, and we went through April 17th, where we helped our clients figure out how to go after all the financial support they could get. So it was everything from the EIDL, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, to the PPP, which is the Payroll Protection Program. There were grants. There were other areas of free money per state, per county. And then we also helped people figure out how to get deferments on everything from their mortgages to, TripAdvisor did deferments for you on your business listings. So we did the financial side first because we couldn't jump into reopening or any marketing until everybody was financially feeling okay about things, because it was stressful. It's still stressful, but it was really stressful when this all started. Then our second thing was is we went through the preparing to reopen, and we did that on April 24th through May 27th because we wanted everybody to have the tools they needed on our client list by June 1st, because most of the inns were going to open as of June 1st or a bit later. Then our third step to our three-step approach was the marketing, and that's the piece that we're covering right now with our clients. So we're going to go over the preparing to reopen with you folks. If you have any financial questions about EIDL loans or PPP loans, I can take those too, but I'm not really going to be covering that today. Let's get into the preparing to reopen. Now, today's session is really just a drop in the bucket. The financial piece, we spent 6 hours over those 4 or 5 weeks getting our clients ready financially, and then we spent over 10 hours on the reopening strategies. So we did the 9 parts and did one webinar 2 times a week, and that's how we got through everything. So you are getting the high-level flyover view of that 9-part reopening strategy. So this is the outline of everything that we went into detail with our clients on. So when are you opening? When are you ready? Where do you start? And this was the survey we did at the end of April and said, have our clients tell us when are they going to reopen. And you can see the majority of clients were really pretty much going to hit in June. So we want to make sure everybody had the data they needed by then. So here's the second step of our 3-step approach, preparing to reopen. We're going to talk about bookings and reservations, cleaning and sanitation, food service, guest rooms, what to do if somebody gets sick at your property, cancellation policies upon reopening, because I am sure that everybody had a lot of issues with cancellations when this first started, but now you have a fresh start to reset your cancellation policies going forward in case there is a second wave or your local government says, hey, you've got to drop back. So public areas, staff safety and training for inns who have staff. And then finally, contact list check-in, which is a big deal these days so that you don't have to be too close to your guests. So these are the 9 parts that we went into detail. It took 10 hours, so you're getting the shortened version. But let's jump into booking and reservations. First of all, you kind of have to determine the risk of reopening and understand what does that mean to you, your guests, and your staff. And we have to take into consideration how people feel about reopening, travelers, your staff, and yourself. And then you have to figure out what can you do and what can you not do. And this is very different from county to county. It's not even state to state. We did the same webinar for the Florida inns, and their guidelines per county are very different. Some were allowed 50% open, some were allowed 100% open, some had no guidelines, some had a bunch of guidelines. So you have to figure out what it is that you're allowed to do. Are you allowed to be 50% open? Are you allowed to be 25% open? Just what all can you do and what can't you do? I was talking with another client just via email today, and their guidelines for their county is way more stringent than what even the CDC was asking for. They were asking that people go in and have room cleanings done during the guest stay, and most innkeepers are not even entering the guest rooms during the stay. So it's just really interesting county to county. It's different all the way across the United States.
Lisa.
So, yes.
I'm just going to jump in here real quick. Elizabeth is asking if the slides are going to be available, or should she be taking notes?
Oh, I can make the slides available, no problem. And if I say something really interesting, write that down so that you don't forget to do it. But yes, we can get to the slides.
All right, awesome.
So are you going to clean while the guest is there? Are you going to clean before the guest is there and seal up the room? How many rooms are you allowed to rent? I have innkeepers who are only renting rooms that have private entrances. I have innkeepers that are like swapping rooms so that they leave a couple, the ones that have been used, they leave them set for a day or two before their cleaners go in to let the virus, if it's there, dissipate. There's all kinds of ideas about how you should get everything clean and when you can re-rent. And if you are only allowed to have 50% of your rooms open, well, that makes it pretty easy. If you can have 100% of your rooms open, then there's a risk there with your cleaning staff about cleaning. So things to think about. And then once you figure out how long your rooms are going to sit, if you're going to let them sit before they're re-rented and cleaned, how are you going to keep your booking engine updated so that you don't overbook your 50%? I was hearing about a property in Texas. They were at 50% occupancy, but they were following that as a very loose guideline because they were booking 100% on the weekends and less midweek. But over the whole week, they only had a 50% occupancy. That's not probably what the guidelines meant, but I see a lot of people doing a lot of things to try to get the revenue back up, trying to follow the guidelines, at least maybe not to the T, but in essence, doesn't necessarily mean that's the way it should be. So just know that you have guidelines you need to follow. And are you going to screen your guests? Some states won't let you have guests from certain states. Florida still is not taking guests from New York. They just started taking guests from Louisiana. So depending on the state you're in, what guests are you allowed to take? And how do you conduct those phone screenings so that you are only following the guidelines in which you have been provided? And what's your criteria going to be? And are you sure that you are legally allowed to ask those questions? And then consider your online travel agency information is out there, and they're trying to combat this whole issue themselves. So how you put your data on the OTAs needs to coincide with what you're doing on your own website. And then finally, once you figure out what you're doing and how you're going to do it, how do you communicate that to the guests so they know when to book and how to make those reservations? And are you going to give them online policies? Are you going to require that they sign a confirmation letter when you send it, saying that they won't attend if they have a fever, they will cancel if they have a fever, that they haven't been around anybody that's had COVID in the last 14 days, they're not coming from a state you're not allowed to receive? I mean, how do you get all those guidelines out there and make sure everybody's following them? So quite a bit to think about when it comes to booking and reservations. So that's the first part. The second part is cleaning and sanitation. Have you created an upgraded cleaning process? Because things are a little different than they used to be. Inns are notorious for being clean places, but now with COVID, how that happens and how your staff does that or how you do that may have changed some. So if you've upgraded or you just want to publish how great you were to begin with, make sure that goes somewhere that people can see it. If you need help thinking about how to communicate a cleaning process that you adhere to, Association of Hotels and Lodging, they came up with their Safe Stay program, and you can check that out. You can subscribe to that, and you can say you follow it and use their icon. There's a lot of guidelines in there, one of which that we'll cover later says that if somebody is sick at the property, you will communicate that to the CDC, which if you say you're going to follow this process, that's part of the process. Also, there are other groups. I know Florida is coming up with their own state cleaning levels. I think I heard Select Registry was building a cleaning process that SR could say we follow the SR process. I've heard of other states setting forth these, and even some lodging groups setting forth cleaning. So if you want to, hook your wagon to one of the other cleaning stars and say you follow those, check out AHNLA or another one that fits your area. And then the CDC has their whole set of disinfecting a building facility online. So you can see what it is that's required. But again, you have to check what your local county is telling you to do when you open, because some of them are pretty stringent. Then consider all your surfaces. You have hard, soft bedding, carpet, draperies, pillows. I mean, how do you sanitize a pillow? I mean, I guess you can have washable ones, but you have to think about all those things. And then also frequently handled items, the things that people are touching and multiple people are touching them, like the credit cards when you take a booking, any of your credit card readers, pens, papers. A lot of you have activity notebooks. You may want to consider taking those over and moving them to something electronic so that people can download those on their own phones. And then there's a whole bunch of new cleaning things out there. There's steamers and foggers. If you've read the Marriott piece on how Marriott is using their new foggers to kill the virus in the rooms before the next guest comes in. So Cleaning and sanitation requires some amount of thought and effort, and then announce it somewhere on your website that so people know that you are taking this seriously. That's really the biggest thing. I did a week's travel a week ago, and there are some areas of the country who if you said COVID, they'd say COVID what? I was shocked at some areas who didn't have any guidelines in place, and I didn't really feel very safe there. But I had other places that were very, very conscious of COVID and making sure you had your mask on and that you were standing far enough away from each other. I mean, it's it's all over the map. But I personally believe, in what I'm telling my innkeepers, is that if you are the person that makes the guest feel the safest, you will be the one they choose. So you want to communicate how you are making that guest as safe as possible at your property. Then part 3 was,
Lisa,
yes.
we had a question that asked some pretty specific questions about the spread of the virus and how to clean specific items. And I just wanted to mention that because we're not going to cover the specifics of how to clean and disinfect items during this webinar today. We suggest that you check with the CDC, or if you are a member of ALP, they have done some really great specific webinars that by cleaning professionals that have really good information. So if you are a member of ALP, you can go back and watch the videos of those webinars. They're accessible on that website to be able to get some more specific information about that.
The ALP webinar, they did one with the virtual webinar they did. I think it was on May 6th. The gentleman who does the cleaning webinars, he spoke there, and then he also did an individualized one that Heather hosted at ALP, Heather Turner. So if you need access to those, give Heather a shout and she can hook you up. But those were good webinars. Yes, you can imagine that week when we covered sanitation, we were on the phone for an hour and a half talking about all the different options you had to clean a room, and pillows and bed skirts and carpeting and all of it. It was very detailed, but yes, Annie's right. Thanks, Annie, for bringing that up. Okay, so part 3, food service. You have to rethink, how are you going to feed your guest? And there's a little more to this than just breakfast. So consider your location and your food needs. I chit-chatted with an innkeeper in Santa Fe the other day, and they said that their biggest challenge right now is they're at 50% occupancy, and they have this lovely, huge, long dining room table that seats like 20 or 30 people. I mean, it's massive. And they can't really have people in there because those people are too close. They're not social distancing. So they are setting up areas throughout the property that a guest can have breakfast by themselves, but out in the sunshine, so that they're breaking that apart. So you have to figure out where you're going to feed them and how are you going to handle your guests' food needs. So maybe it's a hot breakfast that you serve in the room, or maybe if you have a cabin or a cottage, you're stocking a pantry or a fridge. But remember, whatever food's in there, they need to take with them because you really can't reuse that for the next guest. If you're going to serve it in a shared dining area, can you do it where the restaurants, the couple of restaurants I've been to, they're making sure that nobody sits closer than 6 feet to another person. Maybe you can do that in your dining area. Maybe you have a big enough room that you can pull out a couple tables and make that work. Maybe you just decide to do a boxed breakfast in the room, or maybe you're not going to serve breakfast at all. I do have some innkeepers that are just doing vouchers so that they can go to the bakery and then grab their breakfast on their way to whatever they're doing that day. So think about how you're going to handle food. And then your liquids. Oftentimes inns have like coffee and tea stations that are public. You got to rethink about how you're going to do all of that. And maybe you would just want to put everything into the rooms instead of having people touching it because you want to keep it as safe as you can for all your guests. Then snack service. A lot of folks do evening cookies, the cookie jar, things like that. So now you have to rethink how you're going to do your snack services. And then, will you be cleaning the guests' rooms after they arrive? I found it interesting that the one county that we were talking to the client on was requiring that it be cleaned. And I'm thinking, I don't think I want my staff going into all of these people's rooms. And a lot of inns are just saying, we're not doing cleaning service at this phase of COVID recovery. So see if you're allowed, and then make sure you announce that to your guest if you choose not to do that. And then again, your cookie jar, you got to have safe packaging for your evening snacks or any snacks you're giving them. And then this is something that goes with food service, but it's not you, but it's kind of happening at the property. So say your restaurants really aren't open yet for dine in, and your guests are coming and they need to have lunch and dinner. So maybe you work up a list of people that you know that will deliver to the property. But again, you don't want your delivery guys coming into the property. That just adds more exposure. So maybe you have a sign outside that says, meet the guest here. And then the guest meets the person there with the food, and then they just, take it from there. But again, where's the guest going to eat? If it's going to be in a public space, we did a pizza place the other day, and they had little coasters, and one said clean and one said dirty, and you knew before you sat down at one of the available tables if it was clean or dirty. Well, if you have outside eating or space for people to sit around, you got to make sure they know whether it's clean or not. So you just, how do they get the food? Where are they going to eat it? And how do you keep delivery people out of the inn? So things to think about there. And then nothing can really be shared. Your butters, your jellies, sugar sweeteners, creamers, you're going to all have to have individual packets. And then what are you going to serve your food on? Will you use disposable plates, glasses, mugs, silverware? Are you going to use disposables? Or are you going to sanitize everything? And if so, how are you going to do that? And how will the guests know that those have been properly sanitized and handled? So that's food service. So lots to think about, not just what you're preparing and how you're going to give it to them and where you're going to give it to them, but also how are they going to handle food service throughout their stay. You may have enough restaurants open that they can actually participate at the restaurant and they have, the 6-foot seating all broken apart, but you may not. It just depends on what part of the country you're in. And then part 4 is guest rooms. And this is still a little bit about a cleaning thing, but are you going to do freshening during the stay, or are you not? And you get to decide, assuming your county hasn't told you have to, and then you need to communicate that to the guests. Now, if you're not going to do room cleaning, how do you make sure that they get new sheets and towels when they need them, but you don't overstock it because you're going to have to wash it no matter what? So you have to think about how you do that. And then doorknob handles. You could potentially have little wipes outside the door or some type of sanitizer in the rooms. I am always leery about how many people touched that handle before I touched it. I'm not the only one who thinks that. So how will you handle that for your guests? And are you going to provide hand sanitizer, wipes, etc. in the rooms? I have a lot of innkeepers that are packaging these things because they don't want to have mugs that are being reused, so they're doing a gift with a mug and hand sanitizer and a mask. Some of my innkeepers are having custom masks made for their guests, and Acorn made masks for all of our clients and my staff, and we shipped them out. They were really cute. They had little acorns all over them. I did over 300 of them, and washable cotton. And a lot of innkeepers go, oh, that's really cool. Can you guys do that for us? So my son took that on, and he's got some seamstresses building masks for innkeepers. So you might want to have a little gift bag where you give a mask, hand sanitizer, wipes, like individual wipes, to a guest as a gift. It's a thought. So something to think through. And then how are you going to handle your amenities? You've got soaps and shampoos. And if you're doing individuals, and they don't use them and they're still sitting out where you left them, you can't just leave them there for the next guest unless you sanitize them before you leave them. Maybe you pull them off the floor, out of the room, and set them, you can quarantine your little soaps and shampoos until, a week later, and then reuse them however long, you decide according to the CDC you want to leave them sit. And if you're using a shared shampoo dispenser, that may not be something people are comfortable using. So you have to kind of think about that. And then how can you make sure the guest knows that room was cleaned and sanitized and it's all good for them to use? You might consider the little peelable seals that you put on the seam of the door. So it says this room has been cleaned and sanitized, so that they know when they break the seal, nobody else has been in there since the cleaning person, and nobody else is going to go in there but them while they're there. That's something to think about. Maybe you have a little note board on the wall where your cleaning person can sign it. Welcome to the inn. We hope you enjoy your stay. We took the utmost care in cleaning your room, signed whoever it was on the date. I mean, you could do something like that so that they know that the room has been cleaned and sanitized. So think about how you make your guest room work for your guests so that they are feeling comfortable there. And a lot of inns, if you have private entrances and cottages, those are the things that people are kind of looking for right now. Short of the drive traffic, they are looking for self-contained rooms where they're not really walking by a lot of other people. So, moving on to part 5. What to do if someone contracts COVID at your property? And it's your responsibility to take reasonable care to provide a safe environment to your customers. I mean, that's just basic business 101. Now, legislation may or may not be passed to relieve businesses of COVID liability. Different states are doing different things. I believe AHLA is also trying to fight for this. But if somebody gets sick at your property, all I can think of is all of those ADA lawsuits that we have helped with for the last 3 or 4 years. The United States is a litigious society, and if somebody feels like you wronged them, it would not be unusual to see them want to sue you. So if you have any opportunity to work with your local government to pass anything that will help you mitigate any type of liability for COVID, whether it be with your staff or a guest, I would suggest you look into supporting that, because you don't want to end up in a lawsuit that it wasn't really your fault. Could be one guest making another guest sick. You don't know what's going to happen. So, will you take a temperature? Our YMCA is opening up downtown, and they said they won't let you in unless they take your temperature. I mean, there are businesses that require that you have to let them take your temperature before you're allowed in. So will you do that? Will you have a list of symptoms that you refer to, whether it be on your website or on your policies page, where they sign off, yes, I agree to these policies, where if they have symptoms, will you refuse service to them? Do you have a list of all the testing options, medical facilities in your area, should somebody who gets sick at your property know how to get there? You need to make that contact information available for all of your local emergency facilities. And if somebody asks you for medical advice, don't give it to them. Just tell them, here's all my list of my emergency facilities. But are you going to have a checklist that says, if you get sick while you're here, if you get sick before you come, if you are sick when you arrive, what are you going to do? Now, some inns may choose to ask a sick guest to leave. But if so, have you defined those actions in your policies, and have you gotten your attorney to sign off on that so it doesn't invoke a lawsuit? If the guest agrees that if they get sick while they're there and they sign off on the policy, then, they've agreed to it. And what are you going to do if someone like your staff or your guest contracts the virus at your inn? Are you going to contact the CDC? Well, if you use that AHLA stay safe insignia and say you're following those guidelines, that's part of the guidelines that they have in that list. And are you going to contact other guests who were there at the same time, which gets into the whole contact tracing. Some of the restaurants we've been to, they want my name, they want my email, they want my phone number, and they want to know who all was in my party, because should they make a note of when I was there, what day and time, should someone else report that they are sick with COVID, then the restaurant can let their guests who were there know and their staff who were there know. So what kind of plans do you have for this? And what kind of plans are required by your county? Some are requiring that you take this information and have it, and others are not. So what is your plan of action? Make sure you know what that is in advance based on your county or state, depending on where you are, guidelines, and verify that it's legally appropriate, whatever it is you're going to do. And then if you need more information, again, there's that link to the CDC with disinfecting the ability of the facility, and they'll give you more information on that page about what if somebody gets sick at the property. So as a business owner, your responsibilities just quadrupled here. You really have to think about, how do you keep it clean? How do you feed people without them, being around other people? And what do you do if somebody does get sick? Okay, that's part 5. And again, this is the
Hey, Lisa.
Let me finish the screen and then we'll take a question.
Okay.
This is the AHNLA Stay Safe logo, and they say right there, at a minimum, confirmed cases of COVID shall be immediately reported to the local health authorities in accordance with the appropriate actions recommended by the CDC. So if you decide that you're going to say you're following this process, or whatever process you're following, if they need you to submit, if somebody was sick, you committed to it if you say you're following that process. So I just wanted you to know about that. Okay, Annie, questions?
So Laura's asking, if you have guests sign a waiver, aren't you covered?
I have a lot of innkeepers that are building waivers, and it's part of an electronic contactless check-in that they do online. And there are some tools out there where you can be like on, it's kind of like FaceTime, where you can kind of be on the screen at the same time as you're walking them through their rooms, and then you send them to the link, and then they sign off on the form that they understand the policies. So obviously anybody can sue anybody for anything, but yes, you would think that that would help if you do get a lawsuit, that if you had a signed liability waiver, that your attorney could immediately help you with that quickly and not let it go crazy like a full-blown lawsuit. Same thing with ADA. If you've done everything you can for ADA, your attorney's going to have a much better chance of, nipping it in the bud before it goes crazy. Same thing here. But again, whatever you have them sign, I've seen waivers that are like, oh my gosh, I couldn't even begin to travel there. It's like one of those whitewater rafting waivers that says if you kill yourself, it's all your own fault. I mean, I've seen some that stringent, and then I've seen looser ones. So again, legal counsel, work with them to figure out the best way to communicate what you want them to sign off on, and then find a way for them to sign it. Make sure they get a copy of it. Okay, Annie, more questions?
No more questions. Thank you.
All right, let's keep going. Part 7. Now, a lot of you, I am sure, from when this all started happening mid-March, early March, have had cancellations coming out your ears because people couldn't come. And how you handled those cancellations at that time was pretty much knee-jerk. We didn't know what was happening. It all happened very suddenly. I had some innkeepers just giving all their money back, but after the first week realized they couldn't keep doing that, and then they started negotiating with the guest. That time is over. We now have a chance to take control of the end product again. So as people are booking at this point in, you have to think about, how are you going to handle cancellations moving forward? And you want to make sure that you're prepared now. Not very many people were prepared before because we didn't expect everybody to cancel. But now we know it can happen. We need to take steps to be prepared. So are you going to have really strict cancellation policies that says they are the way they are? If you have to cancel, you have to pay me, whatever it is. Are they going to be very strict? Or, as our innkeepers seem to find the most luck with this, is a shared responsibility that says, oh, okay, I understand you need to cancel. Can we get you a gift certificate? Can you come another time? We know you would love to come. We want you to come. Can we do a gift certificate? And then even some who said we can't do a gift certificate, they split them. They said, okay, let's do 50-50. I'll give you 50% of your deposit back, but 50% in a gift certificate. People were getting really creative as to how to adjust your cancellations, and then using that information going forward for future bookings. And some people are like, I don't care. I just want the person on my books. I will make it fully refundable so that I get more opportunity of people who want to come. And should somebody cancel, well, at least I had more because I made it fully refundable. So you have to kind of decide how you want to do this. And then keep in mind, obviously, the more stricter the policy is, the less likely you're going to get bookings unless you happen to be the only game in town. Now, whatever you decide with your cancellation policies going forward, what happens with those bookings should we end up in a phase 2 of the virus and we all have to close the doors again. You need to make sure you're prepared this time for your cancellations. And then I'm sure I have this on another screen, but let me say it twice. You have guests that are booking with you, and if they paid a decent deposit and they're afraid they're going to lose it, they may feel they need to come even if they're sick, and you don't want that. So you need to work into those cancellation policies that if they've been exposed or they have been tested and have the virus and haven't quarantined for 14 days, that you will refund them, because you do not want sick people at your inn just because they don't want to lose the funds. All right, public areas. So you've got inside public areas like, well, maybe not the dining room if you're splitting people around, but maybe your check-in area or a foyer or a sitting room, your shared kitchen maybe. And then you have outside areas like decks and patios and porches, all your outside areas. So how are you going to make sure everybody knows what's been cleaned and when you clean it? And ongoing cleaning really should be visible to your guests. It shouldn't be behind closed doors. People should see you with your sanitizer and your wipes and your gloves and your mask, and they should see you cleaning. We talked about this a lot on this call when we did this with our clients, that maybe pine sol scent is really a reassuring thing these days, so they can smell the clean, so they know that the area has been cleaned. But I've heard it called theatrical cleaning, because you're on stage and everybody needs to see you cleaning so they know it's getting done. Signage considerations. What kind of signage are you putting up? Are you going to tell people they need to put on a mask if they are outside of their room? Are you going to have, if you're a bigger property, are you going to have dots on the floor so people don't stand too close to each other? If you're going to have directionals so people aren't walking into each other on hallways, just get your signs out there and make sure that you are explaining on your signage what is expected from your guest. I mean, some restaurants require you have a face mask here. Some don't care. So we always have our face masks, and if they need us to have them on, we put them on. So make sure that you tell the guests what you want them to know with signage so that they don't forget you require a mask, because not everybody does, if that's what you're going to do. And then we get into staff and safety and training. Are you going to provide PPE for your staff and yourself? I've got some innkeepers that are getting work outfits for their staff. So when they get there, they put them on and they clean in their cleaning gear. And then when they leave, they change into their street clothes and they make sure all that stuff is washed for the next day, so that they're not bringing germs in from the outside and they're not taking germs outside from the inn. So are you going to do that? And are you going to test your staff upon arrival for a temperature? A lot of counties are requiring that your staff be tested upon arrival for work. So you may need to do that. And then how are you going to organize your staff by shifts? Because you wouldn't want one staff member to infect all of your staff, because you're going to end up doing all the work yourself. So how do you reduce that by setting up your schedule so that only like 2 or 3 people are in touch with each other at that time, so you don't cross-contaminate your whole staff? And then what if somebody on your staff gets sick? How are you going to handle that? You don't want them coming in sick. And then how do you train your staff? I mean, once you figure out what it is you want at your property to happen, how do you get your staff trained? And then how do you make sure that they follow your guidelines? And how do they respond to a guest's needs? I was in Costco the other day, and it was more like a month ago, but one of the Costco guys saw somebody in Costco who was required to have a mask on, who didn't have one on. He had it hanging around his neck, and he came over and said, I need you to put that on. I mean, are you going to educate your employees so that they can very kindly let your guests know that, hey, you're not doing what you said you would do when you came. I need you to put your mask on in public. I mean, how do you get your staff trained to make sure that that all happens properly? And then how do you make sure that those guidelines are enforced? Everybody needs to know there's repercussions if they don't do what you want them to do. When you're the business owner, you get to define what that is, obviously under the constraints of your county or state. And then finally, part 9. your check-in. Check-in is where you get to meet your guest, and that's not really feasible these days the way it used to be. So what items are you going to need to process at check-in, if any? If you have a booking engine that allows you to take the final payment before they check in, that would be better because then there's no touching of credit cards. But if there is signatures, payments required, how are you going to process that? How are you going to conduct the check-in? Are you going to do it in person with a 6-foot distance? Are you going to do it virtually? What about locks for your main door and your room doors? If you're going to do a contactless check-in, how are you going to manage that? If you still use keys, we've had some innkeepers that were talking about using the little snack bags and dropping the key in with a wipe so that they know that they can wipe it off again if they feel like they need to. If you're using card keys, are you going to go keyless? There are some products out there where you can have your cell phone access the room, and then you just send the guests the access to the room before they arrive so that they don't have to touch anything. And we also have some innkeepers that are using keypads, that the keypads on the actual room door, so there isn't a key or anything, they just touch in the number. And they're providing wipes for the guests to use before they touch the keypad. So lots of things to think about when it comes to locks. So the Stay Safe, Stay Small, Stay In program is a byproduct of all of these steps. This is a lot. I mean, this is so much more than what innkeepers had to do in January. This is so much more. And we just felt like if an innkeeper is going to be serious about doing all of these things, they should have something to boast on, something to say, hey, I took the time to make all of these changes to keep you safe, to make you feel safe. So we started the Stay Safe, Stay Small, Stay In as a follow-up to an innkeeper doing all of these things to make sure their guests see that they're doing it. They're taking the time to do it. So the logo, you can see all the customized logos here. And our clients, we were customizing logos for our Advantage Plan clients. But as an innkeeper yourself, you are welcome to request our standard logo that is not customized. It just says Book Direct at the B&B or Inn of your choice. And the reason, like I said, that we created this was because our innkeepers, they were doing all this stuff to get prepared to keep their guests safe. We know that travel is going to begin local with staycations and road trips. And as people begin to travel, they're going to look for smaller or contained lodging options that just give that reassurance of safety, communication, experience for the owners and the innkeepers to provide. So we wanted innkeepers to have bragging rights because they did the work. And that was the whole purpose of this strategy, was to say, hey, stay safe, stay small, stay with us at our inn, and you're going to have a better time we're going to care a lot because we're innkeepers. We care about keeping you safe. Now, if you want to follow up on a survey, there is a survey on our blog post from May 27th, and we have 3 survey sets of results here. The first one is a Google survey result that Acorn paid to have to the general public. And we asked people, when you're ready to travel again, where are you going to feel the most comfortable? We had 764 results. And they were most comfortable at cabins and cottages. That was their most comfortable thing. Now, these are general people. They may or may not be inn lovers. These are just general travelers. Then we also had a Facebook survey that went to inn-goers, people who followed different innkeepers' Facebook pages. And you can see people who follow our industry were very comfortable in the yellow, staying at a bed and breakfast. And then B&B Finder did a very similar one. And again, they were very comfortable staying in an inn. But Facebook, the survey we did on Facebook and B&B Finder were directed to travelers who know about inns. The Google survey was not directed to travelers who know about inns. So this tells us that targeting your existing guests and targeting through directories like B&B Finder are going to get you guests who already know why staying safe and staying small and staying at an inn is a really awesome choice post, as COVID travel begins again after COVID. So take time to go out and read that article that we posted. It's a pretty good article. And then for those of you who would like to use our logo, Annie can type that into the chat box. If you'll fill that out, I will get you a permission slip to use the logo, and you can get a download of it if you would like to use the logo in your advertising. This is our standard logo for non-Acorn clients, and you're welcome to use it if you like. So stay safe, stay small in. What could you use those logos on? Well, I've got people putting them in their newsletters. I've got people putting them in their blog posts. I have people putting them in their signature lines of their emails and their social media, Instagram, Facebook. They're putting them everywhere. So they can brag on the fact that, hey, when you stay at an inn, you're going to stay safe and stay small. So there's no time to waste. I mean, we're getting down there now. Most of you are probably reopening already, but get your strategy in place. Make sure that your new travel or marketing approach is defined. And if you want to read more, if you go to acorn-is.com and type in C19 for COVID-19 education, we have a blog post on this. And if you want to see how this is working for our clients, I have a ton of client comments that I encourage you to read. They're, again, C19-comments off of our website. Because innkeepers, our clients have just been so delighted to have us help them figure this out. Now, it's unusual. You won't find another marketing firm doing what we did. But as a retired innkeeper and having so many retired innkeepers on my staff, we stopped and said, you know, there's no point in telling an innkeeper to spend money on marketing until A, we help them with their finances, and B, we help them get ready to reopen so they know exactly what they're selling. And we stepped back and we put our innkeepers' hats on and we said, we're going to figure this out and help people. So it's not a typical marketing thing, but we felt our clients needed it. And if you read those comments, you'll see that they were just so delighted to have this kind of information to help guide them as they were on their road to reopening. So, Annie, questions?
Yes, for those asking, the logo request form is in the chat box. Please go ahead and fill that out to request access to that logo. And then we have a suggestion from Rachel. She is telling us about a service called Co-Verified or Co-Verified. I'm not sure how it's pronounced, but basically it's a service that tracks employees' health status. And she has provided that the link for us, and it looks like a pretty neat thing.
And if you do have staff and you do plan to take temperatures and document and do all those things, which is kind of what this sounds like. I haven't looked at it yet, but that's really cool for sharing. Thank you. Make sure that you know how long you should store that information, where you should store it. Should your staff store it themselves? Should you store it? Just make sure that you know legally what you're supposed to do with that information. So thank you. Annie, anything else?
No, we don't have any more questions.
All right. Janice, we'll hand it back to you.
Great. That was fantastic and so timely. And I know that everyone who is in attendance today really appreciated it. As a reminder, we are going to be sending out a recording. And I also wanted to let folks know who are members of B&B Finder that we are also going to be launching a program this month where properties who are members are going to be able to display a badge that shows that they participate in the cleanliness standards. And it's fantastic, everything that Acorn has done in taking that step back and giving the innkeepers what they've needed to get prepared for where we are today. So I couldn't be happier with the content that we reviewed today and just really appreciate everything that you've all done for the industry.
Awesome. Thank you. And everybody, good luck as you reopen.
Absolutely. And let us know how we can help. We'll talk to you all real soon.
All right. Bye-bye.